We met him in March of 1964. I arranged a lecture at the Civic Center about 10 miles away at Rockville. And we became friends. I knew him only 1 year and 1 month, the last year of his life. And he visited from California here about 5 times in that last year of his life, just intermittent. He didn't stay at this house all that time. But on February 26th, approximately 8 o'clock in the morning, a space friend, contact of Mr. Adamski, came to this house. I was still asleep. But when I got up, Mr. Adamski told me that he had been told that we should get cameras ready for filming later in the day. And, of course, I had never seen one so close before, or I didn't expect that they were going to come hovering that close in my yard. I would have rented a Polaroid or prepared with more cameras, but Mr. Adamski actually helped me put film in the little 8mm Bell Howell movie camera. And he had film in his Kodak camera too. And we waited. Now, they did not tell him what time they were coming, but this was earlier in the morning, but this was middle of the afternoon, about 3:30, when we noticed them at a distance. And we were at the dining room window looking out, and they came in closer. And by the way, 3 more spacemen came and knocked at the door just before the incident. And Mr. Adamski went, and they told him they said, "Get your cameras ready, they're coming." Now that is how close he was associated with those people from other planets. And it's difficult to believe, but they looked just like American. One of them had brown hair, and one had dark hair, and one had slightly gray hair. And they parked in a car, I believe it was an Oldsmobile, but I don't know the year, down here at the street when they came, and then the spaceship came. And we went outside, but I had a broken leg. I had fallen the month before in my living room, and I was in a walking cast. And but I was able to walk around, but with a little limping difficulties, but I did get around. And but when we came out on the porch up here and started to film, he told me to film, and he was going to film. I said, "George, I can't do this. I'm too wobbly." And I had not had the camera but 2 months. My husband had given it to me for Christmas just 2 months before. So I handed him, he said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I gave him my camera, and he laid his down, and he filmed it then. I started, but I wasn't sure of myself, and I didn't want to miss it. So I gave the camera to him, and he finished filming it. But I was, clumping around in the background and able to walk, of course, without too much difficulty with this cast on. But they only stayed about approximately 10 minutes. They did not land. They did not get out of the spacecraft, but there were glimpses of people through the round windows. And they maneuvered. They came in here. It was a low humming and a low swishing sound. And they came in, when they got close here, they came in very slowly. And it was round, and there were 3 of these, well, about this size, I guess, these landing gears underneath, and they were going like this, retracting in and out. And they told George later it was for stabilization. If they'd put all of them out, they would have had to land. And they kept one retracted all the time, and the other 2 were going in and out. But anyway, low swishing, low humming sound. And it wasn't real loud, but there was definitely a motor sound accompanied with it. And it was a brilliant royal, between a royal and a purple blue in color. It was a beautiful blue, and deeper blue than this. And it was round, and as it moved, it looked crooked, and on the film it shows this slight distortion, and it looked, lopsided and so on. But they were moving and putting on this performance for Mr. Adamski to back up, his efforts to get the world leaders to tell the truth about the visitors from other planets. they were demonstrating. They wanted him to capture this on film, their abilities to do certain maneuvers. And they wanted him to have this proof to show the people of the world, because our world governments have better film and they haven't shared any of them with us. And they wanted Mr. Adamski to have this piece of film to show, you know, to the audiences when he was speaking, how they do these certain maneuvers. They did this on purpose.
Bob Oechsler, a robotics engineer and former mission specialist of the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, is also convinced of the Rodeffer film's authenticity. He believes the flight pattern indicates an energy field which enables the disk to maneuver independently of terrestrial gravitation.
The individual images as they came up clearly showed something that you could not see with the naked eye in looking at the film or even looking at the individual prints under close scrutiny, and that there was a haze, if you will, a very tight haze, almost like a fuzzy outline around the craft itself on the image. Now, this, of course, compared to the trees that are visible in the film, which were crystal clear and very well in focus. In other words, you have a very sharp contrast. You immediately might be concerned about the possibility of capabilities of double exposure, which is, of course, very difficult to do with film. However, in this particular case, we found it very, very intriguing that the craft itself had very, very sharp contrasting edges along where the porthole areas are and around the top of the cab. But especially in the bottom portion of the craft, we began to see that there was light emitting from the craft, but this was not a light such as a glow, like a reflection you'd get if somebody was projecting a light onto an object. This was rather interesting because it tended to suggest that there was some form of energy associated with the vehicle itself that was actually causing this sort of a red glow in the undercarriage area. But that, along with the glow that we were getting, the sort of a haze, a very, very distinct fine haze around and very, very close to the craft itself through the images, suggested that there was an actual radiation effect. Almost, I guess you could liken it to a mirage effect. People are fairly familiar with when you ride down the highway during the summer and you look across and you can see the heat rising, and it tends to distort images that were behind the mirage. Well, this is very similar to the effect that we saw on this object, suggesting several things. One, that you were actually looking at a three-dimensional object as something that was superimposed onto the film. That, again, suggested credibility with regard to the film. And secondly, it suggested that there was technology associated with it. This was not just, you know, a trash can lid or something that was just casually thrown up in the air while filming was going on. So began to become much more encouraged with what I was seeing. The more I began to look into the individual segments, the film itself, the motion, we began to see things that you might liken to a distortion. In other words, the craft itself physically changed shape. Now, not the whole craft, but it seemed that portions of the craft changed shape. Now, this was a product either of what you might call an optical illusion as a result of the technology associated with the craft, the method that it used to maintain its levitated state to violate gravity, or it was a mechanical apparatus associated with the craft itself. We noticed that the ball structure in the bottom of the craft, in concert with the receding of these individual structures, that the one portion of the craft had an indentation that would go in every time this one ball would go up, and then it would come back out into a round disc or circular area. So I think that these features all collectively, more than anything else, and even more than the testimony of Madeleine Rodeffer herself and the historical testimony of George Adamski prior to his death regarding this particular event, all tend to suggest that we are probably dealing with an authentic case. And I think it's time that perhaps some researchers of historical value would probably want to go back and take a much closer look at the George Adamski case in its entirety.